Why not? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, babies, anybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I'm your host, Devin Morgan, Director of Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and I'm joined, as per usual, by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy and Assistant Director of Driveline Academy and our Master Mystery, Jeremy Techteal. Wolves, baby. You can tell what type of weekend Jeremy's had because of the jersey and the matching shoes, respect to fit.
Thank you.
You can tell the type of jersey that I have, or the weekend that I've had, because I'm rocking the sweatshirt that I made for the first soccer team that I ever coached.
There you go.
A lot of good times with the Tiger Lilies. Shout out to that batch of young Savage girls who went out and played for me for 4 or 5 years. We never lost a game.
Damn.
It was tight. Housekeeping, as per usual, axbat.com, code DEAL20, get yourself 20% off. Been seeing a bunch of those orders rolling lately, which is tight. Just a reminder, not only does that give you 20% off of Axbat, but it also gets money directly into our scholarship fund. We have done more than $250,000 of scholarship over the last 4 years. To some degree or another, that's going to continue for as long as we're doing this thing. That's where that money goes from, this type of stuff. So if you need a bat, you need a training bat, you need some other stuff that Axbat has, code DL, D as in dog, L as in leg, dog leg 20 will get you 20% off.
You weren't golfing this weekend.
No, but I did watch all that Scotty Scheffler stuff about him getting arrested. So maybe that was what was on mind. Other than that, man, it's the typical housekeeping stuff for us. The power bats are back in stock. So if you were looking for a power bat and saw that they weren't in stock, as per usual, the orders will go to the people that order it while it is out of stock. Get on basically like that wait list, and then we've got a whole bunch of inventory. So the power bats are back. It's a simplified way to do bat speed training. It's a more effective way to do bat speed training than that other stupid bat that they sell in the marketplace that has a gigantic hockey stick on it and it's made out of wood. You know who I'm talking about. Your boy's feeling more than a tad bit spicy today. So, power bat. It's good. You should swing it. Bat speed is going to increase. Bat speed is good. Better things happen when you hit the ball hard. If you want that, buy the power bat. Youth Underload Smash bat is the other thing. Somebody had a good question today, actually, in the Driveline Plus Slack. Maybe you want to be a Plus customer if you want educational resources and also a discount on Driveline products, and wanted to know in the Skills of Scale book, when we talk about the speed trainers, do we mean the power bat? Do we mean the underload bat? So I'll just take this PSA in this particular moment. The old speed trainer system was replaced by the power bat. We went from 2 bats in that speed training system to 1. So if you see in the book a reference to speed trainers, just go, okay, boom, whatever that number of sets and reps I should be doing with the speed training bats, do them instead with the single power bat that you can find in a 30 or a 32 inch length. Do you want a 29? Do you want a 28? If so, email devin@drivelinebaseball.com, 2 E's. Also, Youth Underload Smash bat. And the way to kind of think about these two things is that you want to swing the power bat for the sets and reps given in the program in order to get the appropriate overload stimulus. With the Youth Underload Smash bat, what I was telling this person that asked that question is try to think about subbing that thing in your non-speed training type of rounds. So imagine a day where you've got X amount of volume of speed training swings you're going to take with the power bat. The way that you would work in the Youth Underload would be like, well, let's say if the game focus that day is around the world. You could do that with baseball, smash balls, or ideally the mini hitting plyos you see above Jeremy. And we could do Youth Underload Smashies with the minis. And then all of your speed training stuff would be the power bat. So that's how that works. And also the Big Daddy educational resource up there is the Skills of Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. It's out right now, and it's actually on sale. By the time that this comes out, the sale might be over. I just said the moment that the words escaped my lips and I realized that sale might be over.
And you missed your chance.
You missed your chance. So if you don't want to have that happen again, follow us on socials at Driveline Youth, follow Driveline Baseball, and we'll tell you when all of this sale event stuff is happening. You can get on the Sunday Thunder Nuggets email list. You'll see that stuff there as well. I think that's housekeeping enough. So it's been a weekend. It's been quite a weekend. And I talked to my mom this morning. Had to talk to moms, had to talk to her about just the realities of parenting teenagers. And I said to my wonderful darling wife yesterday, I was like, I think I talked myself into this idea that active parenting was like kind of done. My kids are smart. My kids are well adjusted. They're goal oriented. And I thought it was like, well, the next couple years here, I'm just going to be like shepherding them along the way. And then life was like, hey, dumbass. You remember how much of an idiot you were when you were a teenager, when you were 17 years old, when you were 15 years old? Well, funny enough, now you get to run the exact same playbook, but you're on the receiving end of it. So I did call my mother this morning, and I told her to give my mom and my stepdad a gigantic hug and kiss, because I am just so acutely aware of how much crap I put them through back then. Because to be honest, my kids are better than I was, and it's still, as the parent for that, it's still very challenging. And it's, it's interesting. I think the interesting thing about like the way that the last weekend has played out is there definitely been opportunities where like I've said to my kids, like, hey, I made a mistake. I made a mistake, and I think it's important to try to get them to understand that, because it's hard to, not to turn this into like Devin's parenting theory podcast, but like, it's hard to make positive progress, I think, on sometimes with stuff with teenagers, because you under index for like how much they value your judgment. And there is a baseball specific application of this, I promise. Because they value your judgment so highly, I think they get a little bit gun shy sometimes about communicating honestly, because they're worried that that honest communication is going to like merit another harsh judgment in response. So instead of the truth, you get, I'm good, I'm fine, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Which is not the same as an honest conversation about like, what are we dealing with right now?
Yeah.
And you know what? Because we started off on a little bit of a hippie note, we're just going to continue that way. So for anybody that doesn't know, there's a young man by the name of Kendrick Lamar. He's a modern rap artist. He's put out several very good albums.
Not that young.
Well, I guess he's not that young anymore. He started when he was young, but he's got to be in his early 30s at this point now. Because Section 80 came out a long time ago. Nominated, won a Pulitzer.
Yes.
Kendrick's the guy. And Kendrick has been embroiled with a feud of sorts with one Aubrey Graham, otherwise known as Drake. For those of you that listen to his music, you might suggest that I'm making a little bit of division there. But one of the songs in that feud that Kendrick dropped is a song called 616 in LA. It only got released on his Instagram. For some reason, it's not available on Spotify still. I don't know if that's because of the Al Green sample that they can't actually clear, but I digress. My kid found some edges in competition this weekend. And I don't really want to get into a ton of it, because my wife and I have had some really interesting conversations, and I'm trying to take some signal for about like some ways to keep some walls up behind like stuff like this we put out for you guys who I think are looking for, I don't know if you're just looking to commiserate. For those of us that are intimately involved with youth baseball, hopefully you're trying to take something positive away from it, and we're able to give that to you. So I'm trying to do this in a way that like respects the boundary, but also advances something of value for you guys. So in 616 in LA, over a wonderful Al Green sample, amidst all of the other stuff that Kendrick says fairly disparagingly about Aubrey, he does drop this one little gem in there. And the line is, "There's opportunity living with loss. I discover myself when I fall short." Look, man, I don't really have anything like groundbreakingly technical to talk to you about youth baseball today. I could say the same thing that I've always said before, that like bat speed's important, and we obviously talk that in the housekeeping. We can talk about the fact that like developing throw ball velocity is important, because, well, hey man, if you just can't throw the ball hard enough at a competitive level, you're never going to be successful in this game over the long term. That's just the truth. The thing that I can bring to you today is I found the edges of my ability as a parent to communicate the point that Kendrick makes in that song, which is, again, I discover myself when I fall short. And like, that's just, that's the truth of it, man. I was having a conversation, with the boy about how high school hitting went. And in the middle of the conversation, I just realized, I was like, you've seen harder throwing dudes that I ever had to hit off of. It's like, what do I have to tell you? Honestly, and even if I had played a little bit longer to see guys that were like pumping upper eights, I mean, and again, it was the early 90s, so most kids weren't even throwing that hard to begin with. I mean, that's just also one of the trailing effects of people kind of realizing the velocity is important. It's very similar to like the NBA's realization that like 3 is more than 2.
Yeah.
I think this idea that like there's value in loss and that there's value in coming up short is a really tricky one to unpack, because I think there's like the moment in and of itself when you're probably less likely to have a well-structured, controlled response to that type of adversity, and then the way that you contextualize that adversity later and the strategies and systems you come up with in the aftermath of that to slowly over time shift the way that your inherent natural response is. And I think some of that actually rhymes with some of the conversations I've had with my daughter over the last couple weeks about just like mechanisms of communication. I think a lot of times coaches and kids, and certainly parents and kids, I remember as a kid constructing this idea that like my parents and I had like this adversarial relationship, that like there were things that I wanted and they were actively like preventing me from getting them. It's like, it ain't that.
Interesting. I had the exact opposite growing up.
Man. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why I talked myself into that, but it's a MNFer to be on the other side of it. Yeah. And being like, oh no, now you're coming to me and like you're coming to me and are constructing this type of a framing of an interaction that's predicated on your idea that like there's something you want in it, and like I'm actively preventing you to try to get it, instead of I'm actually trying to propel you forward so that I don't even have to be involved.
Yeah.
And like this manifests itself in what I'm calling the 2 or 3 egg problem. So because my kid is here, he understands the importance of good nutrition broadly and adequate nutrition to sustain like muscle growth and development more specifically. For 3 years, maybe 4. Yeah, this is probably like COVID-ish, so at least 4 years. I've made the same thing for breakfast, or my wife and I have made the same thing for my breakfast, for his breakfast, for 4 years. The exact same thing. It's going to be either turkey bacon or some chicken sausages, 2 eggs, couple waffles, couple pieces of toast, a bagel, etc. And that's what he does for breakfast 97% of the time. He's decided he wants to get bigger. He wants to continue to put on muscle. He lost a tiny bit of weight in the high school season, certainly not as much as he could have. So he's like, oh, I want to do 3 eggs. And then some amount of those 3 eggs ends up getting like pushed into the dog's bowl. So we got a game, yesterday morning, and I don't want to waste food, right? Like I grew up close enough to my Depression era grandparents that like that idea of wasting food is, is a tough one. So I'm like, hey, do you want 2 eggs or 3? And I'm asking what I think is an innocuous question, but there's like this half a beat in the response that I'm like, oh, you're trying to carve the path to like tell me the thing that you think I want. And he's like, 3. And I was like, well, hold on, time out. Because number one, I don't want to waste food. I don't want to, like, The dog eats fine. He doesn't need additional egg-based protein. But 2, I was just like, man, it occurred to me like the weight of the relationship in that particular moment between parent and child. Cause like, it's not an honest, I just want 2 eggs. I think it's a grappling of, well, I think I just want 2 eggs, but I feel like maybe I should push myself to have 3. Maybe dad wants me to have 3. Like, in all those layers that go into the decision-making process that get further and further away from like the true fidelity of like what you want.
Yeah.
And to me, I think there's a link between like the 2 or 3 egg problem and like this Kendrick thing, because it all revolves around, a perception of like you're working towards a goal. You're aware that there's going to be like struggle and failure around that goal in the process of like seeking out that goal. But then it's different to have a conceptualization of how that struggle is going to go. And then when you're actually met with it, you go from the ability to have like, well, I'm aware, I'm a rational person. I'm aware from a rational perspective that when I reach this failure point, an edge, that I want to have a rational response to it that looks like X. But when you're 15 years old and the rubber actually meets the road, I think it's a lot harder to summon that tool to be like, my rational brain has entered the conversation. And you're much more likely to have a response. Sometimes it just looks like the instinct thing, which is either rage, frustration. You want to put your hand out, you want to pull your hand off the burner, like whatever it is. But that Kendrick man, the Kendrick thing, man, like I discover myself when I fall short is like the 3rd time. You can have the prepared attempt at a rational response. You can have an actual irrational response in the moment. But then there's the 3rd thing, which is like the retcon of how did this actually go and how do I want it to change the next time. And that very much like describes the entire weekend that I've just had in my life. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And I guess just, to again, bring this a little bit back more specific to baseball, I do, it does bring me reason to think back about minor and major interactions that I've had with my kids that could have pushed them either closer to or further away from just like the honest transaction of how are you feeling? How did that go? How do you want it to go? What are we going to do next? And it's, man, it's tough. It's tough. And I mean, and I do, again, I told my mother this morning how idiotic I felt thinking that like, cause what I think I thought it was going to be is a lot of just like what some people think coaching is. I'm just going to say the most magic words.
Yeah.
Right. Like I had Travis Snyder, who had a wonderful article written about his organization, 3A Athletics, in partnership with Mike Neely, who runs that 3A thing with him. Travis had an article that appeared first in The Athletic, and I think now it's in the New York Times. Yeah, you can.
I guess the Athletic is owned by.
Well, they have.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, they. I think they took it from the paywall, and now it's publicly out there. So if you want to,
it's a great article.
It's a fantastic article. If you want to hear anything from a guy who, again, is like been to the mountaintop, legit space alien compared to the majority of the rest of the population, but then carried some baggage from his time in youth baseball.
Yeah.
That to what degree that affected his career, I talked to Travis and we met for 2.5 hours. I don't know that he could say definitively like, well, if I hadn't had this youth baseball experience, I would have had a 30% higher likelihood of staying in the league longer. I don't know that that's possible to say, but I think what he would tell you is that a lot of the experience in youth baseball, the pressure created like this house of cards thing that when he started to meet real adversity at a higher and higher level, that it became harder and harder to contextualize.
Yeah.
So read Travis's article. It's really, really good. I think nowadays, if you just Google Travis Snyder MLB, it should pop up like one of the top of your search results. If you go Travis Snyder MLB Youth Baseball, you'll probably find it more specifically. I'll try to add it to the show notes here to make that process way simpler for you than have to Google anything. But man, I don't think we spend enough time talking about the pressure that these kids feel.
And again, we can cut this if I don't know how much you want to go into the pod, but like there's a lot of pressure that comes from being on my team.
Yeah, I mean, we're here once a week.
Yeah, I'm sitting here doing this. With most of academy operations are run by me. So like there is this expectation that my teams are or should be like better than any other team in the academy because like, well, if the person directing most of this isn't good at it himself, like that's, kind of an indictment on the process.
Yeah.
And like, I've coached these boys for a long time. We have lost a lot of one-run ball games.
Yeah.
A lot of really close, tight one-run ball games where we are right there and we play good baseball and we walk out of there with an L and not a W.
Yeah.
And it's totally okay. Like totally fine. And there's just this added element of pressure that sometimes makes it not fine when it's my team. Whether that means like you have a couple of different age Driveline kids or families or coaches watching that game, and like paying attention to performances, good or bad, or just the pressure of getting on the mound and not being able to close out a game in that situation for that team. And it's like there's already a lot of pressure with youth baseball, right? Yeah. And like go read that Travis Snyder article. It's he lays it out fairly well, like how much pressure is on a kid of that ability going, like climbing the ladder and getting better. Yep. And it's not lost on, I think, either of us that it is heightened. Like for my team specifically, they get talked about a lot on the podcast. Yep. They have a bit of a target on their backs when they go out and play a bunch of other teams in the area. And that's a really hard thing for a 15-year-old. Yeah. To really contextualize that and understand why that's happening to them. And why sometimes it feels like the opponent is way more excited to beat them than they would be if they beat another team.
Yep.
Or things like that where it can spiral really fast for a 14, 15-year-old when they don't really understand why outside people care.
Yeah.
And like why there is this expectation. Yeah. And all they want to do is live up to it. And they feel like they've let something larger down. Yeah. When they lose a game, right? It's not just like I let myself down or I let, my teammates or even my coach. It's like I let the program down.
Yeah, and then you have to engage them about like, well, what's the truth? Right. What's the truth of this? Like because there's a difference between the pressure that you feel to perform as a competitor, the pressure you feel to live up to whatever version of yourself you aspire to be, or the actions you're taking, and intimately the results that you're getting. Are those things telling you that like all of this is working out the way that you think you want, or like are you on the path? There's all that, and then there's the other layer that gets heaped on. Look, man, I put my kid on the cover of a book that I wrote. Yeah. Like I'm very aware that that to whatever degree, there's pressure there that I'm probably complicit to some degree in it. But I will say, and I want to come back to the team thing in a second, but I will say specific to my kid, to my boy, we had a really honest conversation about that last night. And what I said to him was like, relative to this idea of pressure and, an expectation. I was like, okay, well, if you really want to get technical about it, and if I'm trying to think about this whole thing as like a disinterested third party and not me, my career, your aspiration. Right. I was like, look, man, technically, this whole idea of the skills of scale ideology is all about weaponizing the time from like 8 to 14 to land as a competitive 90-foot baseball player. And what I told my son is like, look, if there was ever a point in time where there should have been pressure to achieve a specific result, we're past it.
Yeah.
We're past it, because we did choose to spend our time differently from 8 through 14. And you did not get cut as a high school baseball player. Any of the other shit, playing varsity, whatever, any of the other stuff, playing varsity, et cetera, metrics is kind of irrelevant. The whole point was just like, be a competitive 90-foot player.
Right.
And we landed there. The other stuff now is, to me, just kind of irrelevant relative to, do I need my son to achieve XYZ in the game because of this?
Right.
But again, it's the 2 or 3 egg problem. I can tell him that. We can have a rational conversation about that, but it's different for me to go, like, if I say that whole thing to him and I say, am I right? Does that make sense? Like, I try to ask my kids that all the time. Does that make sense? If he's giving me an answer to that, he may well frame the response to that as the 2 to 3 egg problem.
Right.
Do I tell you that I want 3 eggs, even though I really don't, because I think that you want me to have 3?
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, the only thing I can say again before we get back to the team stuff is I've tried to express to my kid how much more invested I am in being his parent for as long as I'm drawing breath than I am invested in being his coach for the time that he's going to spend as a baseball player. Whether his baseball career ends this year, whether it ends in 2 years and 6 years, like I don't care. He's going to be my son for a heck of a lot longer. And I've tried to, I really, really, really have tried earnestly to have him understand that.
Yeah.
There isn't, at this point, I'm pretty convicted that there is not like a magic level of times that I could say that where it's like, okay, box checked.
Yeah. Hey, development's not linear.
I know. I say it all the time.
Yeah. And and like, he knows it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if he's on the mound and things aren't going well.
Yeah.
You know, it's that thing is very far from like the center of your mind.
Yes.
When you're standing on the mound and going through that, like, I don't care what you have to say. Like, I don't know if I've talked about this in the pod. I probably haven't, but like, it's one of my favorite examples of how to deal with human beings. Parks and Rec, great show. There was a story, like, if you don't watch Parks and Rec, one of the characters,
get on it.
You should get on it. But one of the characters, Anne, was pregnant with another character, Chris, his child. She's complaining, and he is solving every problem that she has. Like, just trying, in his Chris Traeger way, solving every single problem she has, like, without question. Like, her feet are aching, great, I'll massage them, whatever it is. And then she is complaining about him to other people that they work with, and the response is like, and then they go to Chris when Anne complains, and they're like, hey, just tell her that sucks.
Yeah.
She's not looking for you to solve the problem. She's looking for you to commiserate, understand, and say, hey, that really sucks. I'm here with you. Like, most of the time, people know the solution to their problem. They know what they have to do, and sometimes they just want to vent about it.
Yeah.
And like, they don't want the problem solved. They just want like an ear to vent to a little bit, to let off some steam. And I think, like, when you're on the mound in that situation, you know what the solution to the problem is.
Yeah.
Your child knows the solution to the problem is, dog, relax. You are really good at baseball. Just stop putting this pressure on yourself. Stop. He knows it. It's not going to be like this in that moment, right?
Right.
Like,
right.
You watch it in professional baseball. Guys have a bat out and then they go and take it out in the Gatorade cooler, right? Like, this is just a thing that it's human nature. You're not going to instinctually be able to solve every problem like that, like, really quickly. There are some problems, especially when they're happening in a little bit more of a public space, that are just like harder to hide your reaction to. And especially when you're 15, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you were talking about a lot of the adversarial relationship. I had the exact opposite. And I don't think my mom listens to these, but like, love you, Mom, if you do. We've had these conversations. I feel like my parents tried way too hard to solve all the problems I was having.
Yeah.
And didn't give certain times enough leash for like, hey, you got to go figure this out on your own.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're having a problem with a teacher, a classmate, whatever it is, like the solution to that for the rest of your life is not going to be mom and dad marching out of the school and solving it.
Yeah.
Like some of these, sure. A lot of these, like, hey, this is being a human. Like we're like, I'm here for you. I can help you try to navigate and find the best solution for this. But a lot of these problems, like I can't solve for you. I can just help you. I can coach you to finding the right solution. And like, I think that's a lot of, what happened this weekend. And like one of the things for me growing up, I never felt like adults were ever supposed to be wrong.
1,000%.
Like they're smart. They know what they're doing. Like they're if an adult tells me something, like I'm just gonna listen to it. If we have kids who listen to this podcast, you should think that until
think critically, young ladies, boys and girls.
Yeah, but not too critically, because then sometimes you can be, not you're labeled like a smart ass or whatever. Been there. But like it was like a really, I will never forget my sophomore year of high school where I got into an argument with a teacher, over.
I can't wait.
Oh, are you ready for this?
I can't wait.
David Wright versus Alex Rodriguez, and who was the better baseball player? Who was the better New York third baseman at the time? He had grown up. My teacher had grown up in New York. He was a Yankee fan.
Yeah.
He was really the one who pushed me to go into baseball for a career.
Yeah.
And like at an early, that started freshman year.
And also introduce you to the idea that people in baseball have these like very just like stuck perspectives on stuff. They're not going to listen to reason.
Well, so, in this, like the actual thing was we had this argument about Alex Rodriguez versus David Wright.
Yeah.
And he told me something along the lines of like, because Yankee fan, I did not like. And still, even though I sit here wearing the jersey of the team the guy owns.
I know. Did you see him on the court
Yes, I
last
did
night?
see him last night. It made me so angry. Like all I wanted to do was like, okay, I'm a crier. Cry some happy tears that the Timberwolves made it to the Western Conference Finals. Tearing up a little bit, watching Ant on the court, and then immediately A-Rod pops into the picture dapping up Ant, and I was like, God, come on.
Yeah.
That's the worst. But so we got into this argument, and he was basically something along the lines, I don't remember the exact words, but it was more something along the lines of like, remember I told you should work in baseball? You're never going to work in baseball if that's your thought pattern. Of like Alex Rodriguez versus David Wright.
Bet.
I spent the next 3 months in his class, which was like a guided, it was actually called Creative and Critical Thinking. Okay. It was like a district-wide program that like a select few kids got in, and it ended with a semester-long project.
Yeah.
And I turned my project into creating, researching Bill James and sabermetrics, and creating a formula to prove that I was right and my teacher was wrong.
Let's go.
Which started me on the reason I'm sitting here, right?
Yeah.
Like it started me on my career path. And like I cannot thank that guy enough.
Yeah.
And like it sounds like I didn't like this guy, but that argument, and when I proved him wrong, his reaction was maybe one of the most like profound things to happen to me, because an adult admitted that they were wrong.
Yeah.
And admitted that like, hey, you, a 15-year-old kid, has proven me wrong here. You got me, man. And that was like one of the first moments I can remember where I'm just like, oh, wait, maybe adults are wrong too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times kids, when they have that, adults are like infallible. They forget that like we're also humans. Yeah. And like we're going to make the same mistakes that you guys are. The only reason I'm here to help you through that is because I already made them. And I don't want you to make those same mistakes.
Yeah.
But if you don't take that accountability and like admit the mistakes and tell them how you learned that lesson, I think you're missing something in building that relationship with them, of really getting that buy-in from them and understanding like where you're coming from in that situation. And like, the two of us sat in the outfield and shared a couple of tears in between the two games yesterday. And it was like, not me and you, but me and Danny. They know his name's Danny. I was gonna say that we refer to him as your kid in the podcast.
Yeah.
And I told him that I also feel a lot of that pressure.
Yeah.
When I'm coaching, that like it's not just you, man. Like the thing you're feeling is totally reasonable and expected, and it's not a bad thing. we have to embrace it in a different way.
Yeah.
And like, there's a different way to go about this than the way we have been. And I'm here with you. We're in this foxhole together. We're going to figure this out. And you're going to help me and I'm going to help you because we're both in this very similar boat where we both have pressure on us.
Yeah.
I'm older and have learned how to deal with pressure a little bit better than you have.
Yeah.
So I'm going to help you out a little bit here. Those types of conversations, if you're not willing to, like Kendrick Lamar, admit that you have failed and have learned from that failure to kids. If you want to have this like Superman persona where kids think you're just like undefeated and invincible at all times, you're missing a lot of relationship building with the kids of being able to get them past some of these experiences.
And it's understandable even outside of this specific circumstance. So it's like the pressure that kids are going to feel at 14, 15, 16 because of, again, what you just said a couple minutes ago, like growth is nonlinear, right? Like the Mets just are going to give $5 million to Elian Pena, a 16-year-old prospect. Sure. He's 6'2", 155. But like, that's a thing that's out there, right? And whether it's, international kids who get signed really, really early, whether it's, some of these rankings and all this other stuff, like it's completely understandable that, that even if all these other, I don't want to say issues, circumstances that we just talked about that are a little bit perhaps more specific to us, or might be more specific to you if you are coaching and you're coaching your own kid.
I was going to say that was the where I was going to bring this all back to is like, I think this like really speaks to how bad daddy ball is.
Yeah, it can be.
Even with a dad that has like a pretty clear head and knows what's going on, and a kid that has a pretty clear head and knows what's going on. And like, you're not even the coach in that, right? Like, you're not in my dugout. You're sitting in the stands. That, even if you think you're doing it the best, and I'll never forget, I interviewed a guy to coach, and his son is in our program, and he wanted to coach his son. And I said, like, we don't do that. Yeah. Like, that's not a thing we do in our program. And the response was, no, it's okay. I'm harder on my kid than the rest of the kids.
Because the presumption is
that's why we do like either way, right? Like, because the presumption is, I'm daddy ball. My kid's gonna hit leadoff. He's gonna play shortstop. Like, I'm gonna give him every opportunity. Yeah, that's not good. I don't want that. I also don't want the other thing where your kid can literally never live up to the expectations that you set for him because you're coaching the team and you refuse to give your kid an inch. Yeah, like neither of those situations are good.
No,
and I've seen a lot of daddy ball, and I don't know that I've seen the actual situation in the middle where like a dad is able to coach his kids at neither of those two extremes, and their relationship is not at all impaired or affected by the fact that their dad is the coach.
Yeah.
And for those listeners who I haven't said it yet on this pod, but I don't have children. But like I promise you when I do, I am nowhere near coaching them.
It's such a it feels a little catch-22-ish, honestly.
100%.
Because you have to acknowledge, the thing that I found when I started, because I started as an assistant coach, and I was like, somebody's got to know more than me,
right? So
I'll just show up and I'll help. And then you realize how untrue that is. Mm-hmm. So then the perception that I had was like, okay, well now the thing that I've kind of signed up for is it like my kid's experience. And let's just talk about the experience, not anything even skill related, just the experience. Is it rewarding? Is it fun? Is it engaging? That experience is going to be largely defined by the structure that's created by someone who for sure doesn't know more than me.
Right.
And might be less invested in creating that type of experience.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, I either put myself at that risk or I open up this other door, which is I think I can do a better job of this than the alternative. But I think if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you're probably aware that like there's a pretty definitive reason for why I'm as involved in my kids' lives as I am. And you can extract from that about what I did or didn't get from some of the parental figures in my life fairly easily. It's hard as a young parent to understand the world you're moving into when now you've bundled the two things. Yeah. I am both your loving, supporting parent at home, but I am also the conductor of this experience in that's related to competition. Right. It's related to competition. And again, you know, I think part of the reason that we push so hard for parents and coaches to have this perspective that like engagement matters more than the result is because the kids are inherently going to bring that type of like need to win to it. Right. You don't really need to do that much. Right. And again, if you've been around this thing long enough to have like the youth baseball development certification is the thing that you went to, that was where, you know, learning all that Jean Piaget stuff about developmental psychology and kids' inability to differentiate between we won and I'm a winner versus I lost and I'm a loser, like that. But I didn't learn that until I was 8 years down the road coaching. You know, like nobody told me that at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it feels very much like a catch-22, you know, like I don't, honestly, I wouldn't do it differently because I do think that I have had the opportunity to be really close to some very joyful, but also challenging moments in my kids' lives. Mm-hmm. That had I not coached, I wouldn't have been there as close.
Yeah.
So for me and everything that entails with everything in my background, I think that is an important box to check
for sure.
But I'm sure that there's also other ways to do it, man. Like there's other ways to do it. And because ultimately, you know, when your kids are really young, it's just like, just have fun and do the thing long enough. And then you get to that point where it's like, all right, well, you actually are kind of serious about this. So like, now let's think about the next thing. And I don't know if this is going to make sense to anyone else's brain other than mine, but my brother, Rob Haney, who is he's the chair of our ABCA committees for youth. Rob's the man, high school coach over there in Virginia. Rob sent a message. He was just out, like they went to go like see a Little League game of a kid that they knew. They know the family. I want to say, Rob, heat check me here. Regular season Little League game. I guess he didn't give the age of the kid. More intentional walks. Little League regular season. So I instead of making like a very pithy comment about it, I was just like, look, I've tried to be clear about how idiotic this thing is. Let me try to be really obtuse. So second musical reference on the pod, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. We're all familiar. Pretty great album. Song in there called Time. One of the things one of the lyrics that's in that record that's pretty, I think, relevant to this conversation about like developmental choices. And then one day you find 10 years have gone behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. Intentional walks are a choice, and it's a strategic choice to take the bat out of a kid's hand that you think is going to do damage. It deprives the pitcher, the team, the hitter of an opportunity to see how their skills just match up in competition. Right. And again, like we just talked about, like kids have a desperate need to win because of a variety of reasons, but that's always going to be there. And look, there's a lot of things I would do differently about the way that I coached youth baseball for the time that I did it. I try to obsess about those things as frequently as possible, and then I take them into my parenting. But like, you know, that whole idea of like, you missed the starting gun, you didn't know when to run. You know, we're talking about, you don't realize how important it is to develop these things up until the point that it's like readily in your face.
Yes, I think, and it's too late.
Then it's too late, and you missed the gun. You know, like we got a chance to watch a little bit of college baseball these last couple of weekends, and like you just see all these little microcosm moments of competition, and sometimes you win them, and sometimes you lose them, and you know, like again, if you've been around this thing long enough, Jeremy's got a recurring segment talking about like the errors that professional baseball players make. And to me, I think hopefully the signal that we're sending there is just like, we try to play this game as best we can, right? At the professional level, at the collegiate level, at the high school level, at the youth level, like everybody's is trying to do the best relative to the stuff that they have. Competition is going to show you the edges of what you know and what you don't. At different ages, you're going to find different edges, right? You're going to find kids who have been, they're like 9 years old and they've been playing with leadoffs for a year and a half. Like that's a thing that's out there right now. So if you put those kids in an environment where that's the way that the game is going to look, then they're going to have a definitive tactical advantage over every other kid out there that like doesn't have that type of experience. I had somebody that asked me in that little thread about, well, when do you think that intentional walks should be like tactically allowed? And for me, I don't see the drawback to having them globally banned until high school. I just don't.
Yeah,
I really truly don't.
So I think we talked about one of the 13 U teams on the podcast that I went out to see a couple times. They're in a reasonably close game 2 weekends ago. It's like a 2-1 game. It's close in like the fourth or fifth inning. And one kid on the other team is kind of beating the crap out of us. Yeah. I think he's like got 3 hits already at that point and like driven in all the runs. Like clearly that kid's a problem. And in between innings, the catcher came up to me and was like, he's due up next inning. Can I intentionally walk him?
Yeah.
And I looked him dead in the eye and said, oh, you don't think you can get him out? And he's like, well, no. And I was like, so why are we intentionally walking him?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if we win or lose this game. I care if you have the faith that you can actually get this kid out, that you and your pitcher can get this kid out. How is your pitcher supposed to have the confidence and conviction that what he's throwing is going to get this kid out if the catcher's come up to me in the middle of the inning asking me if we can intentionally walk this guy?
Yeah.
And I didn't know where, we said, I think last podcast, podcast before, that I just walk in here and sit down and he tells me what we're talking about.
Oh, my notes for today's show just make me look like a complete psychopath. So
okay, fair enough. And one of the things, so we played 3 games this last week, our first 3 games, dropped 2 1-run games and then won a blowout. Mm-hmm. The first 1-run game that we lost 2-1. It's a really, really good, well-played game. The first run we gave up. We hit the first kid of the inning. We do that sometimes. It's all right.
It happens.
It's
Driveline guy.
Driveline. Yeah, it's all right. Next, and that was the 10-hole hitter, which it makes it a little worse hitting the 10-hole hitter. Yeah. Next guy up, leadoff hitter. They laid out a bunt. We throw the bunt slightly high to first, off the top of the glove, all the way down the right field line. Clip the top of the glove. Just missed catching it all the way down the right field line. Runner scores from first. The guy who bunted it gets to second. They're up 1-0 on a bunt. We scratch a run across to tie it. But before we do that run was on first after getting hit. Because, this is youth baseball, so he got hit to lead off the inning.
Yeah.
He's on first now. He steals second. And he's my 9-hole hitter. I have my 10-hole hitter up. Runner on second, nobody out. And I'm looking across the field. We're in the third base dugout. I'm in the third base coaching box. I'm looking across at the other team in the first base dugout. And I can see their coaches talking to each other, telling, like, hey, should we tell the kids to move in for, bunt or whatever?
Yep.
It's my 10-hole hitter up. Yeah. 98% of teams in that situation are probably bunting that kid over. It's the top of the 6th inning in a 1-0 ball game.
Yep.
My 10-hole hitter's up. There's a runner on second with nobody out. I don't do that thing.
Yeah.
And my team sitting behind me because, I'm in the third base coaching box. I'm talking to them while they're doing it. A thing that I like to do is tell my team why I'm making certain decisions. They deserve to know why I make certain decisions. So they're asking me, because they all just finished a high school season where their coach is definitely going to have them bunt in that situation. Mm-hmm. Is there ever a situation in which you'd bunt? If this ain't it, is there ever a situation where you're going to bunt? And I was like, no, because I trust that kid to get that runner over to third.
Yeah.
without having him give up his bat. And he needs to learn how to do that. And we worked on that the last 2 weeks in the cages.
Yep.
The situation in the cage, in one cage is always 0-2, basically.
Yep.
The other cage, the situation was there's a runner on second, move him over. Runner on second, less than 2 outs, move him over. Do it. Do the job. We've worked on this. I'm going to give him a chance to prove that he learned something from the cages. Now, I coach a team of freshmen. This young, upstanding man happens to be a 7th grader on this team. He's smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But goddamn if he didn't hit a ground ball to the right side to get that runner over to third.
Yep.
Followed up by a single into left field that immediately scored that runner to tie the game.
Yep.
And the very next batter, my leadoff hitter. That is why I didn't bunt.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you connected it to bunting too, because the argument that gets thrown at me all the time is like, well, you should be bunting more because kids need to learn that, like, they need to learn that sacrifice.
I agree.
I agree, but intentional walks ain't that. Right? Like that's
well,
not...
and there's different types of sacrifice, right? Like I had multiple players this weekend in situations where they would really like to swing out of their shoes and try to hit a home run, putting balls into play because the infield's back and there's a runner on third with less than 2 outs and getting that run home.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sacrifice that you're making. Yeah. Now, you still get to swing the bat and try to do the thing. I'm not taking that completely out of your hands.
Yeah.
If you walk the kid unintentionally, unintentionally, fine. Right? Don't just let him walk down to first.
Yeah. Yeah. Compete.
Don't throw him anything down the middle. Maybe don't even throw him a fastball if you're that scared. Let him walk. If you're comfortable intentionally walking him, what's the pressure if you accidentally walk him during the at-bat?
Yeah.
Don't give him anything to hit. But learn how to do that.
And again, 10 years down, you'll start to find you missed a starting gun. You didn't know when to run. You're going to have a situation where that's not on the table.
Right.
And if we aren't using youth baseball as a conduit to like highlight and teach opportunities to learn from those situations, I don't know what we're doing.
Right.
I just well and truly don't.
Yeah.
And again, you know, look, it's not like Elian Pena is signing a $5 million deal with the Mets at 16 because he has like this highly game refined system and knowledge. Like that's just not, that ain't what it is. That ain't what it is. I keep having people tell me that like, well, you have to learn these things. You have to teach them early. You got to learn how to win. You got to learn how to do everything that takes. To what currency do I gain? I'll go one level deeper. What currency do my athletes gain? Because I can teach them to be selfless in the way that they compete by not taking learning competitive moments away from them. I can teach them when it learns to be relentless in competition by not taking competitive experiences away from them. To act as if bunting and intentional walks and all this other regressive stuff that's like populating youth baseball now, it's like these things can solely be taught by the absence of competition is like, man, what are we talking about?
Yeah. And not for nothing, I have seen way more bunts be unsuccessful than actually successful.
Yeah, but they don't want to have that conversation.
No, they don't want to have that conversation. But like, I that is like a, bunts aren't 100%.
Yeah, it's just a foregone conclusion.
Right. The playoff game, Danny's playoff game that I went to, they had a kid lay down a bunt and he couldn't, and now he's down 0-2 and then punches. Yep, that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Starting
an AB 0-2 because you were asked to bunt and you're not very good at it, or it's hard.
Yep. So then what do you do? Well, we got to work more on that.
Right.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
For real? So now instead of the primary core stuff, skills at scale, if you will, we're going to then spend our time on like this game theory optimal minutia.
Right. But I also want to circle back. I think it is important that people understand that like we work on these situations in the cage.
Yes.
I'm not asking the kid to do something that I've never asked them to do before.
Yep. And I mean, I think there were at least two moments in that second game yesterday where we saw kids have that type of approach, put something in play on the backside, on the right side to move runners over with less than 1 out. Mm-hmm. Or no. Yeah. And it was just like, yeah, that's a thing that you can do too.
Yeah.
The presumption that by not bunting, we're like tactically obvious to that need is incorrect.
Right. And my favorite part, because it's going to happen probably all this year and the next multiple years, right? We get runners in a situation where the other team would bunt. They're going to call a mound visit, and they're going to go and talk about how we want to handle the bunt, what kind of defense we want to play or whatever. Yeah. Without fail, every time I go down and I talk to my batter, and sometimes the umpire hears it and starts laughing, and sometimes he doesn't. But I walk out there and I say, all right, so obviously you and I both know I'm not going to ask you to bunt here, but like the other team doesn't know that, and me walking down here to talk to you makes them think that I'm telling you to lay down a bunt. So, hey, maybe they're going to pull their third baseman in. Maybe they're going to set up this whole wheel play, and I want you to knock that kid's teeth out. If he plays in and is like 30 feet from you, I want you to hit that ball as hard as you can past the drawn-in infield, because that is how you beat a drawn-in infield. Yeah. That is me intentionally trying to set that kid up for success by like faking something so that the other coach is going to pull that infield in. Yeah, I can gamify right back. Right back at you. And whatever you want to do. And
it's competitive. It's not walking away from competition.
Right.
Which is the other thing. And again, like look, man, is it uncomfortable to see players that you're coaching or kids of yours like find the edges there? Like, no, absolutely not. But
getting better is not comfortable.
Right. It never is going to be.
Yeah.
I discover myself when I fall short. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a neat and tidy way to wrap this up, because I want to get into the defensive big leaguers make mistakes too segment. And I don't know that I got anything just like super off top, other than to say, don't make the mistake that I did to presume that like if you've been coaching your kid for a decent amount of time, or if you've been working with a team for a decent amount of time, that like you've said some of these things enough. As they continue to play in the game, even if you do a perfect job of all this stuff, there's some natural pressure that's just like the game is going to present, right? That 1-run lead, pressure. Trying to not go 0 for 4 on the day, pressure. Trying to win a ball game, pressure. All of those things are going to be there, even if you do like this parent-player, parent-child, coach-team interaction perfectly.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you shouldn't double down on making sure that they understand if you respond to this in a way that like doesn't meet your satisfaction in the way that you review it, when it's in the past tense, that's just an opportunity to like think about structure, systems, responses that you could improve the next time, because it's going to find you.
Yeah. And for me, it's like the post-game talk that you have with the kids or whatever it is. You have to understand that if you don't admit that you also like we do kangaroo court.
Yep.
My name is on that list. If they want to give me a fine for kangaroo court, they can.
Yeah.
They have. I've paid those fines with push-ups, right? Like that. I am accountable to you. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
I'm not like the person who just tells you what to do and you have to follow and do it. This is like there's a two-way relationship here. There's a coach and then someone who is being coached.
Yep. And
oftentimes as a coach, it can be hard to really remember that that's a thing. And that like you have to, PCA we've talked about. So like the kids have to have their correct emotional tank fillage to hear some of those things. And like, it doesn't do you any good to sit there and yell about certain things when they're just like not in a headspace to hear it. You're just wasting your own words and like letting them know that like, hey, the reason I'm saying this is because I went through it. This is what happened. And like, I don't want you guys to go through it.
Yeah.
Explaining the intentionality is important, I think, to like really build that relationship with the kids.
Yeah.
And just giving them space to make those mistakes and have those emotional reactions. And it's okay.
Yep.
Because big leaguers do it too. Segue. You like that?
Bong.
Boom. Sunday Night Baseball last night. Now, again, we've already talked about this, but I clearly had my eyes on another game.
Yeah.
It's okay. I have a couple TVs. And during a commercial, it just so happened that there was a fourth inning, I think. it's already, I think, 6-0 or whatever the score was. Like, Padres are beating up on the Braves. There's a fly ball to right field.
Okay.
Hit by Manny Machado to MVP runner-up, who is not having a great year so far, but MVP runner-up Ronald Acuna. Soft line drive. Just drops it. Camped under it right there. Just drops it. Defending MVP is sometimes going to drop a baseball in the outfield.
Yeah.
Because he takes his eye off it for a second, or whatever the case may be. He was preparing for the transfer for the throw to try to throw the guy out of third because he thought he was tagging. Whatever the reasons he dropped that ball, he did. So like next time your right fielder drops a ball in the outfield, just remember that like your right fielder, unless you are Brian Snitker, is not Ronald Acuna.
Yeah.
And give that kid a little bit more space to understand that it's okay to make that error, and like it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was before your game yesterday, I was hitting some outfield fungo, and one of the kids had literally, it was just exactly. I mean, I didn't see the Acuna one last night, but it was basically that. It was like, the route was okay-ish. Glove presentation was maybe a little bit late, but it just like clipped the top and came off. And he was coming back in. I was like, all right, do I want to like say something about it, or do I just go like, it happens? And I just ended up, I was like, look, man.
What do you remember why? You remember why you ended up saying something?
Why?
Because you were standing about 20 feet to my left hitting outfield fungos, and I was hitting the infield fungos. But I'm not watching the outfield fungos.
Yeah.
So I walked up to you right after we were done, and I said,
oh, that's right.
How'd they look?
That's right.
And you were like, they were good. And he happened to be standing within earshot.
Yeah.
And was like, not mine.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, well, now I have no choice but to address.
Yeah. And it was just like, it was one of those things where I have no business coaching Ronald Acuna. But what I can tell a 15-year-old is that like when I know what your speed capacity is, and you show 75% of that, and because you didn't really do everything you could to get a really good route on that ball, to work behind and through it with time, it constricted the amount of time that you had to basically finish the play, because you got there maybe a little bit later than you could have.
Yeah.
And the only thing I was trying to get him to understand is that like speed is a weapon because it buys you time.
Right. And
the more time that you have, the more options you have.
Right.
But I literally, I mean, I didn't know that Ronald Acuna was going to drop that ball last night. When
you know who didn't drop that ball? That right fielder on the last out of the game.
That's right. He did not. He gloved that thing.
Mm-hmm.
He gloved that thing. He got there on time.
Gloved it. No issues.
I said the magic words, guys. Or the player just figured it out, and I just happened to be.
Or we said magic words of, hey, it's okay.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's warm ups. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're gonna be fine.
God, man, and I remember we had one. I think we had one like end of season tournament championship game in Little League where we just had the worst IO of all time before the game, and I just like I was losing my and it didn't help.
Well, like if you listen to a lot of the like perfect game or no hitters, whatever, they were like, I was terrible in the bullpen before the game.
Yeah,
I thought I was never going to throw a strike today, and then I got on the mound and it was great. And then the opposite happens all the time. Like your kid, before I put him in, I feel great.
Yeah.
How did it look in the bullpen? Feel great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Within 3 pitches on the mound, he's not feeling so great anymore.
Yeah.
And now things start to spiral. And it's like, the warm ups don't matter. They're literally to get you warm. Like don't treat that as part of the competition. The competition starts when you actually like start to do the thing.
Yeah.
So like you can, I tell my kids all the time about, which it might not even be true. I don't know. But I read this once about Patrick Mahomes, that he will like get picked off all the time in practice.
Really?
And like, it's because he's trying out some weird stuff.
Finding the edges.
Weird arm angles. He's finding the edges in practice. Trying out weird arm angles. Trying to see, hey, can I fit this into that window?
Yeah.
And like, sometimes the answer is, nope, couldn't fit in that window. My bad.
Yeah.
And like, hey, let's get all of this out of the way in practice and find what our limits are in practice.
Yeah.
So that in the game, we know what our limits are and we don't have to think about it. We can just like play within our limits, and we know because we've pushed him.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the way I want you to approach training in here. It's the way I want you to approach infield and outfield before the game. All of that stuff. and they're 15, so it's hard.
Yeah, when it's funny, like once we got to a point where we could talk about, where he wanted to talk about the game last night,
yeah,
and not all the other stuff was around it, but just like literally how the game unfolded. It was funny because he's telling me he couldn't find the turbo sinker once he got on the bump, out off the bullpen onto the mound, and he's talking to me through this process of like. Everything was like he was getting so much run on it. It was just everything was arm side run. It was like a lot. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, then I started shooting like inner third, and it was still too wide. And then I was just like trying to hit him, and it was still running away. And I was like, oh, so he actually knows how to coach himself through this. And yeah. I was like, and I think I don't know, in this particular moment right now, talking to you so that you guys consume this. I literally think that tonight I need to re-emphasize to my kid how proud I am of him, because he did everything that I would ever say about changing the intention relative to like the way that the pitch is moving.
Yeah.
And then at one point, I guess he was just like, all right, I'm just going to bang the turbo and I'm just going to go four seam. And I was just like, there was stuff that didn't go the way that anybody wanted it to. But it's not about the outcome of competition. It's about the response to it.
Yeah.
And I discover myself when I find loss. What is that? I discover myself. I discover myself when I fall short. And if that's not the reason why Kendrick Lamar won that rap battle with Drake, I don't know what is. Actually, it's because the number one song in the country is calling the biggest pop rapper of the last decade a
pedophile.
Pedophile.
Yeah. I did a thing yesterday that I have never done in all the years of coaching this team in youth baseball, and that is pull a defensive player mid-inning.
Yeah.
And I made sure he knew the reason I pulled him was not because he was my catcher, and it was not because he was bad behind the plate, although he was.
Had some opportunities to improve.
Yep. He was doing the thing where he was blocking unbelievably well, and he threw one dude out, should have thrown a second dude out.
Yeah.
And then he just was struggling with the basic stuff.
Yeah.
Where just like when he had to think about it, like trying to frame an outside pitch, he's trying way too hard to frame it, thinking way too much about it, and it just doesn't squeeze. When it's instinctual, ball in the dirt, he's got to jump on it, nothing's getting past him. So, like, I'm not going to pull a kid for not being able to glove a few balls.
Yeah.
I pulled him because he was first and third. The tying run was on third. And he yelled to the dugout, "Do you want me to throw to second?" Yeah. Am I supposed to, like, yell and respond to you while everyone is paying attention and watching? Let the other team know exactly what we're going to do? So I called Tom. I go out for a mound visit, and I was like, what's the rule? Like, what's our, like, first and third? Like, what is our rule?
Yeah.
If the run matters, we don't throw.
Yeah.
Does that run matter? I don't know. Yes, you do. Does that run matter? Yeah, it's the tying run. Okay, so you know this, man.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Like, I try so hard to get them to coach each other and themselves on the field. And, like, I don't want to do a whole lot of coaching. Like, I want them, those are the best moments for me when they coach themselves.
Yeah.
And, like, when they're there, because I'm not going to be there forever. And especially this year, you're going off to high school. Yeah. Like, I need to give you all the tools to do this yourself, because your high school coach may not be very good at it. And, like, I went and watched every single one of my kids play high school. And at some point for every one of my kids, I saw them go into their toolbox.
Yeah.
And like coach themselves and make the adjustments. And that was awesome and super rewarding to see. And then they get back on a field with me and they turn and they're relying on it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, like, you know this situation. Yeah. Why did you feel the need to ask me? So it's just a lack of confidence in the situation.
Sure.
You feel like you need to be told something to do. You're not doing it right. There's a lot of different, like, answers to that question, but, like, you can coach yourself here. You don't need me. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to tell you that, hey, the tying run matters? No, you know that.
Yeah. You
don't need me. Like, I'm here to keep this a fun environment, to write the lineup and to sub guys in.
Yeah.
I don't do any of that. So.
Yeah. It's, and look, man, I think if to be honest, I think if we were more invested in controlling the game result, we're giving less opportunities for kids to coach themselves. And that's just
100%. And it comes down to like as simple as one of our hitting trainers came out to watch the game yesterday and asked me with some surprise in his voice, they calling their own pitches? Yep. Are they 15? Yep. When are they ever going to learn? Yeah. Are they going to make mistakes at 15? Yep.
Yeah.
They're going to triple up on a fastball, and that kid's going to crush it because he's now seen 2 of them.
Yeah.
And then they didn't read that swing well enough. Yeah. Or you sort a kid on a slider, and then he fouls off a fastball really well. You sort him on a slider, and you go back to a fastball that he actually hit, even though he looks like he had no read on your slider whatsoever. And he hits it. You're going to make mistakes, and those are learning opportunities.
Yep.
If I just am your crutch and I'm calling every pitch of every game, you're never going to learn because you're now on autopilot.
Yeah.
You're just reading from the teleprompter. You're not writing your own essay here.
Yeah, and the best case scenario is that like you have a kid who's bold enough to actually ask you questions in the aftermath. And again, like
I got a bunch of those.
Yeah, because you've conditioned that. You know? I mean, I really do think
probably.
Because, and again, there's trust and there's safety in that relationship, so they feel like they can volunteer those type of questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell them when I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, and shoot, a lot of times at pitch counts or pitch calling, man, we're just like we're making the best available guess on some sense of like probability and like what's the risk assessment here? Right. Like do I think I can get over one of those fastballs doubled up on the slider? Do I really triple up on it? Do I go full like Dallas Keuchel, throwing like 17 sliders in a row? Like,
there's no right answer, right? Like, there's a result.
Yeah, but again, getting them to think about it from this risk assessment perspective is a valuable thing. It's like we were playing this game. We were playing this golf card game this weekend. You ever done this? Mm-mm. It's really, really simple. You got 6 cards, each. It's 2 rows of 3.
Okay.
And the top card and the bottom card in each vertical row is like a combined score.
Okay.
You want the least amount of points possible. And we had somebody that was playing with us. It was like, this game doesn't require any skill. It's just luck and blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, yeah, but you're under indexing for probability. I got 7-6. Or maybe I got a 7. I don't know. There's all these other. You're just trying to go like of the available options that I have. What's the one that's most likely to be beneficial to me?
Right.
That's pitch selection.
Yes.
Like that. That's what it is.
And that's plate approach.
Yep. 100%.
Right. Like it's all the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah, and we could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we got to go to another meeting.
Yeah, we do.
Axpat.com, code DL20, 20% off, goes in our scholarship fund. That's real good. We appreciate it. Driveline Youth on all the socials, Driveline Youth on YouTube. I think I'm just going to throw that whole like coach clinic video I did up there.
That's probably good.
I'm just going to do it. I was going to try to do it and like screen cap it with the slides. I don't know that I have time to do that, but I'll throw it up there. You guys tell me what you like. It'll be at YouTube at Driveline Youth. What else we got going on? Flex and snapshots are live. Of course, I wait until like the hour-long mark of this podcast to tell you, but like, look, it's just we are opening up the ability for your youth player to come in here and do the driveline. Get this type of biomechanic feedback, get the force plate feedback, get a batted ball profile, meet with a trainer who's going to talk to you about a plan, actually go, this is where you're right now. This is the goal you should be working on. Here's the programming and the training that gets you to get there. You can be in the gym at least once a week. It's in person here in the gym, plus at home. It works perfectly with your existing travel select club baseball team, your little league team, whatever. So snapshots are the one-time 90-minute assessment where you're going to come in and get all that information. And it comes with 30 days of free programming and the meeting with your Flex trainer. Flex is a 6-month commitment to just like doing that thing. You just come in every 4 weeks for the reassessment. You get to come in every week for some type of hitting group or some other stuff once you start running the skill camps. And at the end of the day, it's just going to give you more information, more actionable information about where you are, where you need to go, and the behavior, choices, training, program, systems that get you there. along with the nutrition consultation, the recruiting support for high school age players, blast, pocket radar, and a pulse sensor. We're just trying to give you literally everything. So that's a thing. You can do it in Washington and at our Arizona location. Going to be at a third location at some other part of the country before the end of this year. So look forward to that. And I actually had one other person who's like, hey, if I can never come in, is Flex still a good idea for my player? Yes, because with Pulse, with Pocket Radar, with Blast, which is all included with that subscription to Flex for the 6-month commitment, you're going to get all the tools that we could possibly give you to be able to get this same signal about what's working in home and progress in your training and your development the exact same way.
Yep. And we can't really go into it on the pod, but we got some pretty cool stuff for our high performance testing coming as well that we're going to be able to do with our Flex athletes.
Yeah. Weirdly, just being a good athlete broadly, general athletic preparation, if you will, is going to make your baseball skills better. You want to be a better baseball player, you better be a better athlete.
Yep.
I'm Devin. He's Jeremy. We're Down by Law. I'll catch you next time.